The second most important thing when cooking steak, outside of the seasoning, and that is resting. A quick thing of the science behind it, what you're doing is you're cooking connective tissue, muscle fibers. When they're applied to heat, those muscle fibers contract and they expel all the liquids, all the fluid in the cells. So if you take a steak straight from the grill, put it on a plate or a carving board, slice it straight away, all that juice will ooze out. I'm sure you've seen it a number of times before. Steak looks like it's perfectly cooked. Take it off, cut it straight away. Your cutting surface is filled with blood. That's where all the flavor is. Take your steak off, leave it somewhere where it can rest. When the heat is no longer being applied, those muscle fibers slowly but surely relax. They lengthen again. They are not so contracted because they're not having heat applied to them. And as they do that, so they draw the liquid back into the cells. And so the flavor of meat remains intact. So the other thing to think of is the larger the piece of meat, the larger it needs to rest. So a smaller steak like the fillet, maybe 5 minutes, whereas something like this prime rib that we've got here, probably a little bit more, 10 to 12 minutes, that rest before we cut into this big boy. Another thing when cutting steak, another tip, is what we call cutting against the grain. A classic example of this is of the skirt steak. You can see there's these muscular threads that are running this way. You can just see as you pull it apart, the muscle fibers are running. Now these are muscle fibers. If I were to cut it with the grain, as it's called, I'm just cutting long, thin streaks of muscle and incredibly tough. So we need to cut against the grain, which is what we're going to do here. So you'll see from the bavette, you're seeing the coarseness. If you look at the difference in the two meats, this is very, very fine. That's what makes it very, very tender. Whereas you look at the coarseness of our skirt steak, you can see that that's going to have a far more chewy texture than the fillet is going to have, but it's going to be a darn sight tastier. Let me just... Nice and rare to medium rare there. And we have a steak platter of note.